Now we'll start. Actually, today I thought of reviewing what we did up to now using the latest monetary policy review. We will go through this monetary policy review carefully. Then wherever the importance arises, we will refer to all the lectures that we have done up to now. Now, when you look at this, when you read this monetary policy review, what is the first thing that we remember? The question we have to ask is, why should the central bank announce its policy decisions like this? Now, this is about the monetary policy decisions taken at the last monetary board meeting. And immediately after that, the central bank announces this. Who does this? The communication department of the central bank announces its decisions by way of a press release like this. And also it conducts press conferences. And also we can see those things in the website. What the purpose? The purpose is, then we have to remember, communication departments of the central bank's main function is to communicate whatever the decisions taken by the central bank, either monetary board or the governor or for any other department for that matter, whatever is important for the public, the communication department communicates that through various ways: newspapers, TV programs, press releases, and web presentations like that. Why? The reason is this: the central bank is the forward guide, because as we discussed earlier, the final objective of monetary management by the central bank is to facilitate economic activities so that the economy will have a sustainable growth. I'm going very slow today. The economy, facilitating economic activities to support sustainable growth. That word is important. Sustainable growth. That means continuous growth in the economic activities, and then finally lead into economic development or economic prosperity. So the final objective is that. Then when the central bank take decisions in that regard, it should be communicated to the people. People should know it, because central bank signals the economic agents. Economic agents are households, business community, and those are the main players. Why? Because central bank want the public to have the same expectations that the central bank has. Because central bank studies the economy, look at the past, analyze the present, and also project the future. Then central bank has some objectives: maintaining low and stable inflation rate, that is to support the economic growth. And there are some other variables also. We will come to those things when we proceed with this presentation, this press release. Then if central bank expect people to behave in a particular way, people who behave also should know it. That is the policy announcement. That's why it is announcing the policy. The main player is the communication department. And communication department also announces some other decisions by the central bank with respect to, this is with respect to the monetary policy. Maybe the sometimes communication department can announce government decisions, central bank decisions too. Now very recently, central bank took some measures with respect to the finance companies. And also central bank sometimes educate the public to do certain things. Now, since the whole world, including Sri Lanka, is moving towards more digital transactions, to communicate that importance, communication department can announce those decisions also. Now, may I request all of you to go to the communication department's website our central bank website and look under communication department and announces, you can see from time to time, central bank announces like that. Now, then after studying, understanding the importance of communicating, let's look at the centers. Monetary policy review, right? Okay. Central Bank of Sri Lanka continues its accommodative monetary policy. What does this mean? Accommodative monetary policy. What does the central bank accommodate? There are two policies, accommodative and restrictive policies. Accommodate means any expansion in the aggregate demand is accommodated. We know if the economy is at a stagnant situation or if the economic growth is lower than what it can, then the central bank has to stimulate. The stimulation comes through encouraging business community and the public to increase the aggregate demand. So that is the accommodative. You accommodate any expansion in the aggregate demand. And also, what is the importance of this continuous? That is, starting from 2019, central bank has been having an accommodative monetary policy, expansionary monetary policy, or central bank has eased the monetary policy, cut the interest rates and lower the SRR continuously, especially during the corona period and also afterwards. There were significant drops in the policy interest rates. That's why it is still continuing in that. So when we read this one, we should feel, okay, whatever the policy stance central bank has been maintaining is going to continue. The nature of the monetary policy is accommodative. That is expansion in the aggregate demand. Then that automatically takes our mind to the nature of the economy. The reason for the central bank to follow an accommodative monetary policy is the prevailing situation in the economy is not promising. That is, if the growth is lower than the potential growth, if the inflation is not a threatening concern, then central bank can push the economic growth by having expansionary monetary policy. That is what this means. Okay. Monetary Board of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka at its meeting held on decided to maintain the standing deposit facility and standing lending facility. Okay, this is a situation where the central bank is neutral now in this case. With policy perspectives, neutral. Why? Whatever the policies that were decided in the last board meeting and the monetary policy review, central bank is going to maintain, decided to maintain, no change in the policy, no change in the policy. We know this 4.5 and 5.5 were the ones that were decided at the last meeting, and they are going to maintain the same. That means on the policy front, there is on the interest rate front, central bank is neutral. Then the question arises, what does it mean by accommodative? Let's look at. Later on, there will be some other changes also. Then we can see they are further enhancing expansion of the aggregate demand curve. The board recognized the necessity to continue accommodative monetary policy stance, particularly as market lending rates are yet to reflect the full pass-through of the policy easing implemented thus far. Okay, this says what? Central bank expect that the market interest rate has not gone to the level central bank expected by the time it was following easing monetary policy. That's why it says board recognize the necessity to continue accommodative monetary policy for what? Particularly as market lending rates are yet to reflect the full pass-through. That means they have not reflected the full pass-through. To some extent, the market interest rates have gone down. This means central bank expect market interest rates to go further down. See, yet to reflect the full pass-through. That means whatever the impact that the policy rates have on market rates, the market has not realized the full strength of it. So it will take some time yet to reflect full pass-through of the policy easing measures implemented thus far. Okay, that's the reason. Now, actually, what I'm trying to show is this: when we read that, now I am going to I'm looking at you, a senior level officer in a bank, managing your business by looking at the decisions taken by the central bank. Now, because we are looking forward, and all our decisions are based on what we expect to happen in the economy, then central bank policy is a very important area for financial sector operations. Then we should know what is likely to happen in the future. So this sentence gives the sense to us, okay, central bank will not increase the interest rates in the near future, and central bank wishes further reduction in the market interest rates. So if the market interest rates are going down, central bank will not disturb it until central bank is comfortable of the prevailing market interest rates. Again, we have to understand the same way that the central bank is announcing its expectations for the future interest rates, central bank also will announce if it feels that, okay, the interest rates have gone down enough, now it is okay now, then central bank cannot accommodate any further reduction. In that case, central bank could announce, because interest rates have gone down to the enough level, then it is likely that the future interest rates are going to go up. Like sometimes it can announce. If somebody is interested in looking at those forward signals, create 10-15 press releases of different types, then you can get a sense how that signal is given. Signal is given with a very mild, in a mild way, not a strong way. If there's a crisis situation, it can be strong, but most of the time central bank passes that signal in a very light way. Okay. Board decided to adopt targeted measures to reduce the specific interest rates that it considered to be excessive. Then there is one other interest rate. The board decided to adopt targeted measures. That means there is not here and there. Directly, it targets. Now, when the policy rates are reduced, central bank does not target any particular market interest rates. All the market interest rates are expected to go down. But this particular one, this time, central bank has targeted. Already you may know that the interest rates on credit cards are reduced from 28% to 18%. That is the target one. Decided to adopt targeted measures to reduce specific rates that it considered to be excessive, which would help marginal borrowers. Who are the marginal borrowers? Because there may be people who find it difficult to decide whether to go for this or not. Those are the marginal ones. They are at the single and keyword වැටුඩ. They are undecisive. Then for those people, if the central bank wants those people also, those borrowers also to go ahead, decide, okay, better to borrow, then those are the ones that central bank is targeting here. If the consumption is below expectations because of the high, and if those people are using credit cards to encourage those people, central bank can cut the rates. No, I mean, it is not a policy interest rate actually. It is now at this specific situation, central bank has decided to do so, because at what rate the credit should be extended is up to the commercial banks to decide at what rate they are going to give, because credit card rate is based on the credit given by the commercial bank. But in this case, central bank intervenes and decides. The board anticipates a further reduction in overall market lending rates. See, in the future, entire interest rate structure is expected to go down. Not only one particular interest rate. The whole interest rate structure is expected to go down. Why? Central bank has been cutting the policy rate continuously at several times. Drastically, they have been cutting interest rates. Now they stand at 4.5 and 5.5. And there's another important point here. Thereby encouraging borrowing for productive economic activity. For productive economic activity. Here, the main purpose of central bank following the accommodative monetary policy is to encourage economic growth. In this case, more focus should be on investment. Because if the interest rates are going down, the cost of funds are going down, then the people can invest more. More investment means more economic activities. More economic activities means more income generation and also low unemployment. And low unemployment and more income will make people to consume more. Consumption also picks up. Consumption and investment are two important components of the aggregate demand. And we can see what the central bank expects by doing this. And also reinforcing support for COVID hit businesses as well as broader economy given the conditions of subdued inflation. Here we have to be, you should remember the inflation targeting framework. Remember, inflation, in the inflation targeting framework, we have inflation gap and output gap. Now we know, if we go to that, if you remember that, I may not be able to draw it here because this is a PDF file. We know the inflation gap is the target inflation and actual inflation. Now, subdued inflation means there is no threat coming from the inflation side. That means inflation should be, actual inflation is very close to the expected inflation. So if the actual inflation is equal to the expected inflation, there is no inflation gap. So if there is no inflation gap, central bank can focus mainly on the growth front. In the growth front, what has happened is actual output is lower than the potential output. So they have a negative, we have a negative output gap, zero inflation gap. So without worrying about inflation, we know if the central bank has to worry about inflation, central bank has to have a tight monetary policy. Interest rate should go up. But on that front, there is no threat coming from there. Subdued inflation means that no inflation threat is coming from there. Inflation is low. If inflation is low, inflation gap is also low. Now these days it is close to zero. Then central bank comfortably focus on the output gap. Now here we have a negative output gap. That's why central bank has been following accommodative monetary policy continuously. Prevailing conditions also help central banks to do it. Then let's go to this one. You know that you are required to know both the domestic monetary developments as well as international monetary developments. The same way that we study central bank of Sri Lanka, the domestic central bank, we are also required to know about central banks in the world, especially main central banks in the world. There will be a special lecture about different type of central banks. Probably the next lecture or the one after that, we will focus on that. But here, important thing is the central bank, when it takes decision for the domestic economy, it also has to look at what is happening elsewhere, outside. So this part explains that global monetary easing continued amidst rapid spread of COVID-19 pandemic. See, global monetary easing. So this gives us the nature of the global monetary policy also. Here in Sri Lanka, we have accommodative monetary policy, easing monetary policy. There also, global monetary policy is also easing. What is the reason? The same way that the economic activities in Sri Lanka were affected by COVID-19, and the global economy. And many countries in the world, many economies in the world also were affected by COVID-19. Then you can see the situation is similar. COVID-19 has affected economic activities negatively, significantly. In Sri Lanka, it is not that grave, but in US and other countries, it is very grave. So they have that disturbances to the economic activity, and their nature of the monetary policy is easing monetary policy. Here in Sri Lanka also easing monetary policy. But the point, okay, because sometimes you may be you are required to know whether the monetary policy stance that Sri Lanka is following is similar to what the world is doing, or whether it is somewhat different. Because I know there was a situation where sometimes when Sri Lanka was following easing monetary policy, some countries were following tightening monetary policy. When Sri Lanka was following tightening monetary policy, some countries were following easing monetary policy. The reason was economic conditions were different. Different countries had different economic conditions. Then the nature of the policy is also different. But in this case, especially this COVID-19 is a worldwide common problem. So the nature of the policy is also common. Of course, the degree will vary from time at different levels. When we cut interest rates here by 5%, other countries may cut by 10%. Some countries may cut by 2%. And also when we use the interest rate for that, other countries may use the quantity of money. You may know during the global financial crisis, they had this non-conventional model, quantitative easing. There, the central bank went to the extent of purchasing even the private sector shares just to support the economy. That is not the conventional monetary policy, non-conventional, because situation was somewhat different from the normal situation. Therefore, the policy responses are also different. But now, as at now, Sri Lanka is moving along with the global central banks. Both are following accommodative monetary policy. Reason is both are facing the common problem of COVID-19 pandemic. You may remember, we had a separate lecture on functions of the central bank and also operational structure of the central bank. And there we identified the monetary board and different departments under different clusters, and those departments had specific functions. Here, when we come to this monetary policy decisions, who decides this? When central bank, when the monetary board decides to maintain the standing deposit rate and standing lending rate, is it the central bank governor decides, or monetary board members decide, or is there anyone who is giving this recommendation? Now we know it is the monetary policy committee. We have the monetary board takes the decisions, and monetary policy committee gives the required information and the recommendations for the central from the monetary board to decide. And also that time we understood it is the economic research department who give this recommendation. Economic research department studies the economy and also analyze what has been happening up to now, and also it formulate policies by projecting the economy. So this part is coming directly from the recommendation for the monetary board to decide to maintain the same rates at 4.5 and 5.5 coming from economic research department. Then we remember economic research department cannot do it by itself. The statistics department is the second player. It gives the required information with respect to inflation, growth, and all those estimates are provided by the statistics department. There are two very important departments when it comes to, actually there are three departments when it comes to press release, Communication department is announcing it. That's its function. That is coming under educating the public or announcing the monetary policy decisions to the public. And decisions are supported by the recommendation given by the Economic Research Department through its studies. And also Economic Research Department is supported by the Statistics Department, which collects data and information to support those decisions. So here, that's what I said. When we move through this press release, we will identify department functions and other important areas, and all those things we will discuss. I want to take you through the entire lectures, whole set of lectures that we have been following up to today. That's why I thought to choose this press release. Okay. Now we know global economic environment is somewhat similar to what we have in Sri Lanka. And also the nature of the global monetary policy is also similar, that is easing. Rapid spread of COVID-19 pandemic and related containment measures have resulted in a significant downturn in global economy. Okay, global economy is at a very precarious situation in the first half of the year. That's what happened up to June. In response, almost all central banks, this gives you a very supportive information. In response to this negative economic outcome due to COVID-19, in response to that, almost all central banks of advanced economies. When you say advanced economies, it can be US, UK, this European Union, Germany, there are so many countries, and Japan, even Korea has now joined, China is yet to join. There are many advanced economies, because we know the currencies of advanced economies are recognized worldwide. So when they take decisions on interest rates, those interest rates also matter for the global flow of foreign currencies, and also because these foreign exchange flows. Therefore, they are powerful in influencing the global economic conditions. That's why they have taken almost all central banks of advanced economies, and also there are as well as emerging market economies and developing economies. So the first ones are the advanced ones, and emerging market economies also follow them. Developing countries, economies like Sri Lanka also following them. They're all this. There are three categories: advanced economies, emerging market economies, developing economies. Continue to implement monetary easing measures. The whole world has been following accommodative monetary policy alongside fiscal stimulus. What does that mean? Not only the central bank side, not only the monetary policy side, fiscal side, that is from the government side also, it has been, by perspective of government, the support to recovery of the economic activity. See, to implement monetary easing measures alongside, side by side, fiscal stimulus. Here, fiscal stimulus, again, stimulating the economy from the fiscal side. What are the measures? They can give tax cuts, and also tax holidays can be extended, and also government can give subsidies and direct support. All those are the fiscal side stimulus activities. So the government also were following the same by respective governments in support of the recovery of the economy. So both the monetary policy and the fiscal policy are aiming at pushing the economy towards the potential growth, because economies, Sri Lanka as well as in all other countries of different types, economies are operating below. Here, if we look at this sentence, monetary policy and the fiscal policy are complementary. Whatever objective the fiscal policy is trying to achieve, monetary policy is also supporting. Then the nature of the policies are, they are accommodative. They are complementary to each other. Does that mean that central bank always has to go along with the fiscal policy? The answer is no, because sometimes the government may have objective of stimulating the economy. That's the government objective. The government does not have any responsibility of maintaining price stability. And also compared to the central bank, the government time horizon is short. Any government, doesn't matter which party under whose leadership the government side is maintained, their main focus, one of their main focus is their tenure, their regime, because they want to get elected at the next time too. Therefore, their main focus is to create more employment opportunities and create more income generating activities, and also stimulate the economy so that the people are happy. But the problem is, they can be happy for a shorter period. But if the measures taken by the government are inflationary in the long term, in the medium term or long term, central bank has to foresee that, yes, now the economy is growing, aggregate demand is expanding, but central bank can foresee through its projections, if we go like this, definitely after 6 months time or after 1 year time, after 2 years time or so, there will be inflationary pressure building up. In that case, central bank has to go against the fiscal policy. When the fiscal policy is expansionary, central monetary policy should be contractionary or at least neutral. Now, in this case, fiscal policy is expansionary, trying to stimulate the economy. Monetary policy is also doing the same. So they are complementary. So the problem is inflation is subdued. So there's no inflation threat is coming in the near future. But the problem at hand is the growth. So all are working towards that. But it doesn't mean the monetary policy should always accommodate the fiscal policy. There can be contradictions. Now, if you read history of central banks, there have been continuous friction between the central bank and the government. Very recently, you may remember, very recently, Donald Trump tried hard to remove Jeremy Powell. Jeremy Powell is the Fed Reserve chairman, and before this, especially before this COVID-19, President Donald Trump wanted to have easy monetary policy, but Fed Reserve maintained a tightening monetary policy. Therefore, there was a significant friction between the two sides. But still, and also there was a situation where Donald Trump directly tried to intervene with the central bank policies, but he was criticized for those things. Fed continued. And also, if you have time, if you are a good reader, there's a book written by Alan Greenspan. He's also explaining about the friction he had with Ronald Reagan. That means there can be situations where the monetary policy and fiscal policy are contradictory. They can conflict each other. But in this case, both in the Sri Lankan side as well as in the global side, both the fiscal policy and monetary policy are moving in the same direction. They all are accommodative. Domestic economic activities which were adversely affected by COVID-19 pandemic are expected to recover in the second half. But here, this is giving the support information for central bank decisions. This is the time period. This is expected about the enhanced focus on domestic production for import substitution as well as export, as well as to export is expected to drive near-term growth with potentially significant implication in the longer horizon sustaining a growth momentum beyond the near term would require reforms to address. This is about other requirements. Here, this one. Look at this. Further, now earlier we referred to the external sectors just to say the nature of the monetary policy that prevailed elsewhere in the world. It was supportive for the Sri Lankan one as well. Here they are talking about the external sector. External sector continued to demonstrate resilience. What does that mean? So we did not face any crisis situation with the external sector because we did not default in repaying our loans, and also we did not go to a balance of payment crisis. Resilient means it was hit, of course. Our exports went down, imports, of course, there were import controls, but from the foreign exchange inflow side, we had so many disturbances, and remittances coming from the Middle East went down by around 35%, I think, and the tourism sector was completely down, and our exports and most of the markets, that is European market, US market, and other niche markets, which were using our exports, and Japan, and they also had problems. Therefore, our exports were affected, tourism was affected, foreign remittances were affected. Therefore, we had a significant shock on the balance of payment side. But resilience means that did not lead the country to a crisis situation. Somehow we manage. External sector continue to demonstrate resilience. Even though there are difficult situations, it can be absorbed without developing that into a crisis situation. That's what this sentence means. Now here I am telling this because when the central bank decide its policy, central bank has to look at both the domestic side as well as the external side, in addition to looking at what policies are followed by other countries in those areas. Now, you may understand now importance of this part, reflecting the impact of prudent measures implemented amidst COVID-19 outbreak. What were the measures? There were significant controls on imports, and the import of cars were suspended for 6 months period. And you may remember one time the most important impact on imports came from import of vehicles. Now, when the vehicle imports are stopped, that has a significant easing situation on import side. That is a current account. Trade deficit has narrowed. Here, trade deficit has narrowed during the first half of 2020. The reason is this. Now, we had been having a very discouraging trade account situation because for a long period, our deficit in the trade account was $8 to 10 billion every year. But it has narrowed down. The very main reason is this. The main reason for this narrowing down is imports went down faster because of the control measures taken by the government than the export. Both went down. Exports went down, imports also went down, but imports went down faster. In that case, you have a gap. Then you have a gap. That's why this narrowing. Earlier, imports were, the gap between the imports and exports were 10 billion. Now they were gradually going like this. I think last month, exports earnings are close to 1 billion, but imports were around 800 million or something. That means there was a surplus situation only in that particular month. But overall, whatever the gap they had earlier, they are narrowing down. Then when we say this one, you have to have some sense of what is going to happen, what is likely to happen to the exchange rate. This is the importance of this discussion. When we read a sentence, we should not take only that sentence alone. When these developments are mentioned, then we have to look at what is likely to happen in other areas as well. If the trade deficit is narrowing down, that means the pressure for the dollar to appreciate or the pressure for the rupee to depreciate will also be eased. That sense we have to get. Then if that is the case, if the pressure for the domestic currency to depreciate is going down, then pressure for the central bank to intervene in the foreign exchange market to stabilize the exchange rate also goes down, right? Because we know central bank has to be focused or has to be concerned about three different prices. We mentioned that earlier. Prices of goods and services, that is the inflation rate. Prices of financial services, that is the interest rate. Prices of foreign currency, that is the exchange rate. Central bank has to manage all three. Price stability means maintaining these prices within a comfortable comfortable band, right? Then if the external sector is resilient and the trade gap is narrowing down, that signals, that gives a sense, okay, in that case, the pressure for the rupee to depreciate also is likely to go down. Then the need for the central bank to intervene in the foreign exchange market also goes down. That is, whatever impact that central bank intervention in the foreign exchange market on the money supply is also going to go down. All these are linked. All these are linked. All these are linked, right? Some improvements are, global bit, the trade deficit has narrowed during the first half of 2020 as the contraction of imports outpaced the contraction. See, the contraction of imports outpaced the contraction of exports. Exports went down, but the imports went down faster. Then there was a gap, positive gap, supported by import restrictions and subdued global petroleum prices. And petroleum is one important component of our import basket. And any changes in the petroleum prices have a significant impact on our trade. But here, subdued means again there's no increase, or that is there's marginal drop. That those marginally falling petroleum prices also had a positive impact on our trade sector. Some improvements in worker remittances was observed in June. Earlier they were affected, especially March, April, May period. They were affected. There was significant downturn, but now Sri Lanka seems to be experiencing gradual recovery. Some improvements in worker remittances was observed in June. In contrast to the declining trend of observed since this was what was happening up to since March, but now it has reversed. However, the tourism sector, which has been forced to rely on domestic tourism for its survival in the face of the pandemic, is poised to witness a sizable decline in foreign exchange earnings in 2020. Okay. Now, there were positive developments. Imports dropped faster than exports. Some comfortable development were there. And the foreign remittances were also coming in compared to the previous period, especially from March up to June. But now, another important area, that is the tourism, is still likely to suffer for a continuous period. So now after all these explanations, the press releases come to an important point. Depreciation of Sri Lankan rupee against the US dollar has been limited to 1.3% thus far during the year. Actually, all these were focusing, and all this discussion was gradually bringing the reader to this point. Because central bank is, as I said earlier, central bank is also responsible for maintaining, stabilizing foreign exchange, for the exchange rate. So then it has depreciated only by 1.3%. See, so that area is also comfortable now because there is no significant depreciation. And reasons are given there. Export sector, external sector is resilient, and imports were falling faster than exports. There was some positive impact there. Remittances were coming in, but even though the tourism sector was discouraging, still depreciation has been limited only to 1.3%. That is one area of the central bank responsibilities. That is also is if there is any significant depreciation pressure for the Sri Lankan rupee, central bank has to decide to change its policy rates. But this time, at the very beginning, we saw central bank did not decide to change, because it decided, Monetary Board decided to maintain the policy rates between, at 4.5 and 5.5. There's no change. But had there been a significant depreciation, then to stop that outflow of foreign currency, central bank has to raise domestic interest rates. But here, because the depreciation is limited only to 1.3%, there is no need for the central bank to think of change in the interest rates, focusing on this part of it. External sector is not disturbing. Now there are two areas which were not disturbing. One area was inflation pressure was not there because of the subdued inflation. Inflation gap was almost close to zero. And the depreciation is also not discouraging. Depreciation is limited to 1.3%. So two areas are comfortable. And only difficult area is the growth. That's why central bank is moving along with the government to facilitate economic growth by following accommodative monetary policy. That's what it's saying. With the central bank buttressing its reserves through foreign currency purchase from the market and foreign currency swaps with the Reserve Bank of India and licensed banks, gross official reserves were estimated at US dollars 7.1 billion by end of July, providing what is the importance of this? What is the importance of central banking mentioning about this? We know that exchange rate is influenced by so many factors and also by expectations of the market about the possible changes in the exchange rate. We know that if there is highly volatile situation in the foreign exchange, central bank has to intervene. Then whether the central bank intervenes or not depends on the availability of foreign reserves with the central bank. Because now Sri Lanka has been having a depreciation pressure throughout for a long period. Therefore, always Sri Lankan rupee was under pressure to depreciate. If the currency is under pressure to depreciate, the nature of the action by the central bank is to sell dollars. Because depreciation is because rupee depreciation means dollar appreciation. Dollar tends to appreciate if the demand is higher. If the demand for dollar is going up, then the supply, because supply is coming from imports and exports and all those things, exports, remittances, and other investments coming in. But if the money is going out due to imports and capital outflow, there will be pressure, right? So when there is pressure, if the central bank has no ability to intervene, it will depreciate more. If the market is observing all these things, if you expect the currency to depreciate faster, if you are on the import side, you will advance your imports. If you are an exporter, you will delay bringing your proceeds. So supply will be less, demand will be more. Naturally, the pressure will build up. But that building up pressure is not there because of the sufficient reserve the central bank is having, sufficient for around 4.7 months. So there is a likelihood the central bank will intervene and there won't be any significant pressure in the market to currency depreciate. So the people do not expect, because of that, people do not expect the currency to depreciate faster. In that case, any reaction coming from the demand side of the foreign exchange and supply side of the foreign exchange will not be there. That's the importance of this one. You can see all these sentences are telling a story, not directly but indirectly. The reason is this, because there can be so many other factors affecting this. What the press release is giving you, the information given by the press release is making you to think, okay, these things are happening. These things are happening. Then you have to figure out, if that is the case, this will be the possible scenario to come. Then whatever the scenario that is likely to come is in line with the central bank decisions to either to keep the interest rates the same, or increase the rates, or cut the rates. There's another one. No demand-driven inflationary pressure expected during the forecast horizon. This is about the future. So far, all these have been about the numbers that were referred. Numbers that were referred up to this point were the past and the present. But here they are talking about forecast. No demand-driven inflationary pressure is expected during the forecast horizon. There's a particular period. Horizon can be 3 months, 6 months, even 1 year, maybe a little bit longer. But central bank maintains different time horizons for forecast. Okay, that is this. Depending on that, they are saying this. Now, again, we have 2 important points to remember for your syllabus, actually. Headline inflation and core inflation. What is the difference? Last time also we discussed, but this time we can discuss a little bit more. Headline inflation means, you know that inflation is based on a consumer price index. In case of Sri Lanka, we have 2 different price indices, Colombo Consumer Price Index and also National Consumer Price Index. This was coming from 1952, but this was introduced, I think, 2006, very recently. Very recently it was introduced. Recently, not that recent, 2016. It was introduced 4 or 5 years back. Now, both are giving us the price level of a basket. Index is a basket value, not a particular price. So index value is 100, 110, 112, like that. So always the index value is equal to 100 on the base year, then it can either go down or go up. So its benchmark is 100. It's not like coconut price is 60 rupees, rice price is 90 rupees. It's not like that. All are put in one basket according to different weights. You may have studied at your economics class about the price indices and how to measure the consumer price and all those things. But here we are not going to discuss that. But we know basically this is an index value. What is the difference between core inflation and headline inflation? Headline inflation is the inflation rate measured by using the entire basket. If there are 100 items in the basket and the Department of Census and Statistics estimates all this by taking all the prices into account. Core inflation is a little bit different. Because core inflation is the inflation that central bank focuses, because central bank cannot focus the headline inflation. Then what is the difference between these two? Here, whatever the items that are sensitive to interest rates are only taken if there are supply side disturbances. Now, if you take food items are directly influenced not by the interest rate but by the weather conditions. Like that, directly non-interest rate related items are removed, especially fuel prices and food items are removed. Different countries follow different methods. But here, the important thing to understand, core inflation is based on the basket of goods, demand for which are sensitive to interest rates. And headline inflation is the inflation rate based on the entire consumption basket. Because sometimes there can be items in the entire basket where the central bank cannot influence. Remember, we said the prices can move up and down based on developments in the demand side and also supply side. We said central bank cannot influence the supply side of the economy. It can influence only the demand side. If there is drought, supply goes down, prices can go up. That inflation, central bank can't control. But if there is expansion in income, suppose the government borrows from the banking system, suppose this, government transfer budget deficit. That means government spends more than what it earns from its tax sources, revenue sources, mainly the taxes. And if the government spends that, the government runs into a budget deficit. If the deficit is financed from the banking system is, we know, is expansionary. Money supply is going to go up. When the money supply increases, people get more money in their hands. Then they will start demanding more goods and services. Then the prices can go up. That price increase is directly related to only to the demand side. Supply side has nothing to do with that. Then central bank can raise interest rates and also conduct open market operations, absorb whatever liquidity in the market so that aggregate demand can be pushed towards the origin. But if the prices are rising because of the drought and drop in the supply, central bank can't take any action to increase the supply and increase the production. Therefore, core inflation, this inflation is with items which are sensitive to the interest rates. This inflation is with all the items, some of which are sensitive to interest rates, some of which are related to directly the supply side. But anyway, both have been mentioned here. Headline and core inflation based on Colombo Consumer Price Index accelerated marginally in July. That means there was little inflation coming from both headline and also core, yet remaining at relatively low levels. What does that mean? Even though there was inflation, there were signals of inflation coming in, they were relatively low. Okay, not to worry. Okay, inflation seems to be there, but still it can be manageable. Clear? That means future inflation is also likely to be subdued. So central bank don't have to worry that much about the inflationary front when it takes monetary policy decisions in August. All these are related to the original decision central bank has taken. That is to maintain the same rates at 4.5% and 5.5%. The National Consumer Price Index base headline and core inflation also accelerated in June, mainly reflecting the impact of food inflation. That means food inflation means it is not related to core inflation. As I said, food prices are mainly related to the supply side. Then if there is inflation, that is mainly due to headline inflation. It is not related to core inflation. Then central bank does not have to worry about, because central bank cannot control any inflation coming from non-interest rate sensitive items like food. In spite of such short-term fluctuation, inflation is expected to remain broadly within 4 to 6%. When it comes to 4 to 6%, what do you remember? If we look at the road map of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, which was announced in January, January, about the future expectations of the central bank with respect to inflation, it said central bank expect to maintain mid-single digit inflation. Mid-single digit. What is mid-single digit? Single digit is between 0 to 9. Then mid-single means between, there is a 4.5 line. Now, if the range is 4 to 6%, that means average is 5. Then this is the actual one. See, expected to means this is the future expected inflation rate, actual inflation rate, future expected one. If the target inflation rate is mid-single, that is also around 5. So the target inflation rate falls in between 4 to 5, 4 to 6%. Projected one, that means central bank does not have any pressure coming from the inflation gap. Inflation gap is 0. All these have been supporting, all the statements up to now has been supporting the central bank decisions to be accommodative and to maintain the same rates, and also giving little bit of a push coming from the credit card side. So that's also accommodative. All these are supporting that decision. I request you to read this press release several times, because at one shot you can't get all these senses. What is the problem at hand? That's the slow growth. Is there any threat coming from the inflation side? No, inflation gap is 0. Is there any pressure coming from the depreciation side? No, there is little bit of depreciation, but that is not that much of a concern. And are we in line with the global monetary policy stances? Yes. Globally, almost all the countries, advanced, emerging, and developing countries, have been following accommodative monetary policy. Therefore, our policy is also in line with that. So all these are consistent. All these are consistent. Economic problems are common. Nature of the policies are common, and also the whatever the concern areas are supporting the central bank to maintain that decision. That's the whole story, if you look at this. In spite of such short-term fluctuation, inflation expected to remain broadly within range in near to medium term. Okay, that is probably for 2-3 quarters to come. It will be the same, like with appropriate policy measures. This is another one. Okay. This is quarterly average headline inflation based on CCPI. This is a forecast. This is purely a statistical exercise, but better to be familiar with that also. Headline inflation is based on projections. All these are projections. Inflation is projected to remain subdued in the near term. The impact of measures to stimulate the economic growth and the normalization of global oil prices could exert some upward pressure in inflation towards mid-2022. This is important. See, it is saying inflation is projected to remain subdued in the near term. The impact of the measures to stimulate the economic growth. Now we know what were the measures taken to stimulate economic growth. Fiscal policy was expansionary. Fiscal policy was supporting the expansion of aggregate demand, both from consumption and investment. And the monetary policy was also accommodative. All those are to stimulate. All those are to stimulate the economic growth. When this happens, it is very likely that inflation pressure to build up, because then the monetary policy is expansionary, fiscal policy is expansionary, aggregate demand is shifted to the right. We expect the aggregate demand curve to shift to the right. If the supply does not increase at the same rate, then definitely prices are going to go up. So there is some kind of inflation pressure should be there. But this says impact of measures to stimulate the economic growth and the normalization of global oil prices could exert some upward pressure. There may be mild inflation. On inflation towards mid-2020, that is until 2022, it is according to projections, of course, according to the statement, projections, it is likely that inflation pressure will not be there. That means what? Then it is very now, if we take this statement as a very strong signal, it is very unlikely for the central bank to have drastic policy rates increases. There may be mild ones. This faces upward pressure, some upward pressure. So it is likely sometimes there may be some revision of the policy rates, but not significantly. Now, this is the path given. You may wonder what these it's like these clouds. Now, these are because they can take different scenarios. This is the theme. This is the middle path. So there's no middle path or upper or down for the actual one, because up to now, this is inflation rate has been around 5%. You see, this is 5%, little bit lower, go up to this point. It has been very now. If you draw a straight line, you can see it is at 5%. That is mid-single digit level. That means up to now, starting from 2018 up to now, inflation has not been a threat for Sri Lankan economy, for the monetary policy, because inflation pressure or the inflation gap seems to be zero. The question is, what will be the nature from this point onwards? According to the projections, even though there are different scenarios, this is one scenario, so it gives a narrow band. There's another scenario, it gives a little bit of wider band, even wide band. So after taking all these, the average seems to be moving close to 5% until 2022 and third quarter. So this is what the projection says. This is what it says. That means past inflation was comfortable, present inflation situation is comfortable, projected inflation situation also will be comfortable. That means there is no any threat, possible threat for the central bank to expect from the inflation front. Inflation gap will not be wide. Even though there's a gap, it will be mild one. So central bank does not have to worry about that. That's what it says. So in that case, the only worrisome area will be slow growth. That will be the worrisome area for both the central bank as well as the government. This is highly a statistical exercise, but anyway, since you are required to know this, let's look at. A forecast is neither a promise nor a forecast is neither a promise nor commitment. Okay, even though this forecast says this, there can be certain developments afterward where the situation could change. Actual situation could change. Now, this is the actual situation now. Every month you can move here and check whether this area was maintained. Even though we expected this to happen, had it happened actually, we can look at the end of 2020. And at the end of 2021, we can see whether we had a path like this after forecasting a path like this, whether the actual path was in line with the forecasted line. The fan chart illustrates the uncertainty surrounding the baseline projections path using confidence bands of crash. Now, read this one. This is, I don't want to go to this highly technical part. It is an statistical exercise. They can have different scenarios, as I said, based on using confidence bands of gradually fading colors. The projections reflect the available data and the assumption and judgments made in the August 2020 forecast round. The confidence intervals CI shown in the chart indicate. Now, these are the confidence intervals. This is one interval, very broad. This is another confidence interval, That is another scenario. Another interval all says, even though the confident intervals, it can be 10%, 5%, 2%. If you've done your statistics at the IABF level, there we maintain different confidence level. 2%, that is 98% sure it will happen. This is 95%, 90% sure. Like that, all indicates somewhat similar situation like this. The thick green shaded area represents 5% confidence interval, 50%. There is a 50% probability that the actual inflation outcome will be within the interval. This statistical. Now they call it probability. There is 50% probability is 1 to 1, half and half and half. Out of 100 outcomes, 50% will lie within this line. That's what it says. Slow growth of credit to private sector is expected to recover gradually in the period ahead. Again, this is giving a little bit of a detail about the earlier sentences. Remember, there was a sentence saying that the market interest rates have not gone down to the expected level yet. That is, the central bank expects the rate to go down further. The same thing is here. Slow growth of credit to the private sector is expected to recover gradually in the period ahead. Even now, the private sector credit is not expanding. Sometimes there was a political clash between the banks and the government, criticizing that the banks are not doing enough. Like that is, credit was not recovering fast, but they expect the credit growth to gradually recover year to year, while the outstanding volume of credit contracted during in spite of the large surplus liquidity in the market. This is important. While outstanding volume of credit contracted during June 2020 for the second consecutive month, continuously in spite of a large surplus liquidity in the market. When you come to this, you may remember credit expansion of the banking system. Remember credit multiplier and thereby money multiplier. If you remember, money multiplier is 1 over C. No, yeah. 1 plus C over C plus R. C is the currency deposit ratio. R is the reserve ratio. If you look at the credit multiplier, you may remember, you should actually, if the reserve ratio is 10%, credit multiplier or deposit multiplier should be 10. That is the inverse of the SRR. If the 10% is 0.1, 1 over 0.1 is 10. If the SRR is 5%, credit multiplier should be 20. If SRR is 20, credit multiplier should be 5. All those things you may have studied up to now. Then when you say if the reserve ratio is 10, credit multiplier, sorry, if the reserve ratio is 10%, credit multiplier is 10 means there are 3 conditions required for that. That is, all the transactions should be in checks. That means there should not be any leakages of currency from the system, banking system. And also banks should not maintain any excess reserves. And there should be ready-made demand for credit whenever the banks have the capacity to lend. Now here we are saying here we see something different. Even though reserve ratio was lowered by the central bank continuously. In the last lecture, we saw it. Reserve ratio has been gone down from 6 to 4, then gradually, finally, last month, it was 2%. If that is the case, when the reserve ratio is 2%, credit multiplier should be 50. But it has not happened. It is saying, while outstanding volume of credit contracted during June 2020 for the second consecutive month, in spite of large surplus available in the market, because market had the liquidity. See, in spite of large surplus in the large surplus liquidity in the market had the money. Banks were able to lend. Banks were having sufficient liquidity to lend, but there was no demand. Then see, out of those things, remember again, I'll read it again. For the banks to go to the full strength of credit creation, example was if the reserve ratio is 10%, banks can create 10 times their deposit as credit. But it can happen only if there is sufficient demand for credit whenever the bank have the capacity. But here it says liquidity. In spite of the large surplus of liquidity in the market, it has not happened. And then there have been no readily available demand for credit in the economy, despite the banking sector has sufficient liquidity, despite the fact that central bank has cut the reserve ratio significantly up to 2%. It has not happened. So credit multiplier has not worked during this period. Reasons we know. Even though banks have the money, banks are willing to lend, if people are pessimistic about their businesses in the future, they will just wait and see. Money is available, no demand for credit, because environment is not there for them to take decisions to invest and execute those decisions comfortably. That is the case. However, gradual recovery in credit extended the private sector is expected in the period ahead. It's driven by increased economic activity, improving business sentiment. See, improving business sentiment. When people think, okay, now the businesses are picking up, it is time for us to start business, then they will start borrowing from banking system with enhanced political stability. Okay, political stability is also another area, because if the political stability is not there, from time to time, the governments can change their decisions. So when the government today decides one thing, if another government comes after 1 month, they will change. But you can't make an investment plan just to change every month. Therefore, political stability also should be there. Now, now all these sentences are about the supported development that could happen in the future for the market to recover. Declining market lending rates and rising credit disbursement on account of concessional credit scheme for businesses affected by the pandemic. Credit to the public sector, in the meantime, soared in recent months, reflecting the government's heightened funding requirement, thereby causing notable expansion of broad money. That's fine. Okay. Now it is saying, even though the private sector was not borrowing, apparently the government sector has been borrowing significantly. That is a concern. As a result, what has happened? Thereby causing a notable expansion in broad money supply. Government borrowing seems to have an impact on expansionary impact on money supply. Then that is a little bit of a concern. Possibly inflation could arise because of this expansion, right? So if now already the government borrowing has increased, the private sector borrowing still has not recovered. But if the private sector borrowing is also going to come as expected, then both will have pressure on the market. So it is likely that inflation pressure could build up, could build up in the near future if proper measures are not taken into account. The impact of monetary easing measures is reflected in the second notable decline in the market interest rates. This is about market interest rates have gone down because policy interest rates have lowered. Central bank has lowered the policy interest rates. This is explaining how the market interest rates have followed accordingly. Policy rates maintained at current level while further measures to promote lending introduced. This is just the same thing is repeating. See, Policy rates are going to maintain at 4.9 and 5.5. You can read this. These are the last decisions. We had in the last press release also, we saw there are no changes in this policy. Monetary policy decisions, there is no change in this one. This one also has not changed. This one has not changed, but they have targeted approach to reduce credit card rates from maximum regulated interest rates revised downward. Now these are the decisions taken. All these are, well, last time also we had this. They have not changed, but these are the changes. Maximum interest rates on credit cards, early it was 28%, now it is 18%. Maximum interest rate on pre-arranged temporary overdrafts, 16%. I don't know how much it was earlier. Maximum interest rate on pawning facilities, 10. Again, it was around 18 earlier. Final interest rate over regular interest rate. Final interest rate over the regular interest rate, 2% points. This I am not sure, because without knowing I can't say anything. This is another rate. Final rate over final interest rate over the regular interest rate. Okay, for the next lecture I will learn about this and come to explain to you. Okay. Now these are the numbers to support. Now after this, let's go to our discussion again. So far we have discussed about the basic principles of inflation, the central banking. You have to be familiar with that. And also the main focus of the main responsibility of the central bank, maintaining price. And there were 5 areas, remember, providing facilities for the banking sector to have the exchange. There is providing currency, that is one area. And maintaining the internal value of the currency, that is maintaining low and stable inflation rate, price stability, and also maintaining financial system stability, because whatever the decisions taken by the central bank is taken to the economy through the banking system, and also people do their businesses. Central bank can provide money, but the money is used by the banking system to facilitate economic activities. If the banking and financial sector is not stable, then that whatever expected, whatever the system will not function properly. People will not follow the banking system, use the banking system, then the objective is gone. Therefore, central bank has to maintain the financial system stability. And main focus was on the banks, because if you take the Sri Lankan situation, 70% of the assets are controlled by the banking system. Therefore, if you maintain the bank stability, financial system stability can be guaranteed accordingly. And also we said the rules and regulations, because prudential purposes, because remember, when it comes to bank supervision, we discuss mainly about 2 types of supervision: macro-prudential supervision, micro-prudential supervision. Macro-prudential means taking the entire financial system into account and ensuring that system is stable. Micro-prudential means taking each and every individual unit, individual bank into account and ensuring the banks follow their principles. Bank follow the prudential principles to maintain their businesses. That is micro. And also another area was risk management. Risk management area was another one. Let's go to that slide and talk a little bit about in details. 3:30. Okay. Any comments? Do you have any comments up to now? Any questions up now? Okay. In the next lecture, what we'll do is when the central bank conduct its operation, there are financial implications. Central bank generate revenue. Central bank also has to spend on certain items. And in the next lecture, we are going to identify the main revenue items for the central bank, main expenditure items for the central bank, and if the central bank generates any surplus, what happens to that surplus? Those things we will discuss in the next class. And also we will discuss about different major central banks in the world. Fed Reserve, Bank of England, and Bundesbank, and European Central Bank, Bank of Japan, probably Reserve Bank of India also we will touch a little bit. Those are the important major banks that matters for us. Those things also we will discuss. What else is left? Okay, I will open, I'll give you around 5 minutes to raise any questions if you have. Who is there with us now? Gayumi, Gerald is there, and Nalaya is there, and Petum. Petum, Sachinta, Tarak, Narasingha. Okay. Please ask any question if you have. At least if you think that I should adjust my way of presenting, that also I can adjust myself if you have any criticisms on that. Anything? Today there's no chat at all. Do we get questions from these press releases in the exam? I can't say exactly the questions will come from this press release. Definitely this discussion will help you, because when we went through the press release, we understood the main focus of the central bank. Main focus of the central bank is to maintain price stability. Okay, then price stability was the monetary policy decisions were based on that. And then as we said earlier, up to very recent times, Central Bank of Sri Lanka was following monetary targeting framework. Now Central Bank is following inflation targeting framework. When we have the inflation targeting framework, Central Bank looks at inflation gap and also output gap. Now the inflation gap is not disturbance, because inflation is somewhat close to the expected level of 5%. So there is 0 inflation gap. But now the problem is negative output gap. Therefore, central bank has to lower the interest rates. The nature of the monetary policy should be accommodative or easing monetary policy. So central bank is announcing that. And also depending on because central bank behaves differently under normal circumstances and special circumstances. Now, prevailing situation is not normal. Both in Sri Lanka and in all other countries, situation is special because of the COVID pandemic, all the economic activities were affected. People could not move. People could not engage in their normal activities. Therefore, activities were affected. So the growth was negative. Therefore, there should be special arrangements. Central bank has to do it. Both Sri Lankan central bank as well as other central banks address that by having expansionary monetary policy, or in other words, accommodative monetary policy, or in other words, easing monetary policy. The similar situation was observed when the global economic crisis, during the global economic crisis. During the global economic crisis, all the economies were affected, especially the advanced economies. They went to the extent of even following non-traditional monetary policy, not the usual conventional monetary policy, non-conventional monetary policy. So to say that, depending on the situation, central bank can take special actions. One good recent example is COVID pandemic. And also, if we look at other press release, and there's another one. If we want to identify the importance of departments of the central bank with respect to this monetary policy decisions, and we said communication department is responsible to communicate that. So that is an important area. And also we said whatever the decisions taken by the monetary policy is recommended by the monetary policy committee. Monetary policy committee is maintained by the economic research department. They are the ones who will. Is it positive? I'll read. Then economic research department is the key player, and the economic research department is supported by the statistics department mainly because they are providing data. So there will be, if there's a question, I don't know, if there's a question, okay, what are the important departments of the central bank to maintain price stability? Economic research department is important, statistics department is important, communication department is also important because that has to be communicated to the public. And let's go to another area. Another area is maintaining financial system stability. What are the important area? What are the important department of the central bank for it to maintain financial system stability? We know bank supervision department is important, and also non-bank financial institution supervision department is important. Those are important. Then macroprudential. Now, if the entire financial system has to be maintained, macroprudential department is important. When it comes to prudential, again, you are required to know what are the different type of measurements. That is micro, macro. All these discussions will help you to answer any question coming from the entire central banking syllabus. I can't say exactly. There will be a question from the press release, but there will be a lot of inputs. There are a lot of inputs for you to answer any question coming from this syllabus. Let's look at, there were some comments. Do we get questions from these press releases in the exam? Directly, no, but indirectly, it helps you to understand the prevailing situation and answer questions accordingly. Are there any positive impact on personal loans, housing, etc., rather than business in? Now, this is the case. Now, take a personal loan. Nalaya, take a personal loan. When you borrow, your example is housing loan. Okay. If you decide to borrow a housing loan and start constructing a house, what will be the impact of that on the economy? You will have to buy inputs, maybe the bricks, sand, cement, and all those things. So that creates demand for those products. That is, brick producers will have demand, and you will have to hire masons. Okay, if they were idle before, they will get employment opportunities. When you start paying, there will be demand for inputs, sand, bricks, metal. So they will have to activate, provide. Mason will be activated, and money will flow into their pockets. If they did not have income earlier, if they had a lower income earlier but have more, they will start spending. That will create demand for goods and services. If the demand increases like that, overall demand is there, then those who are producing those items also will have demand. That will encourage them to produce more. Remember, there was a period where the demand was not there. The vegetable producers had to throw them away, then discouraging them. But if there is ready-made demand, they also will be activated. So gradually, there will be an overall elevation of the economic activities. It doesn't matter whether it is personal loans, even for the consumption. Now, credit cards are mainly used for the consumption purposes. The main reason for the government to cut the interest rate on credit card is to stimulate demand coming from there. If the demand increases, is it clear? So, sir, no tutorial in presenting mode. That's right. Because today I wanted to discuss all the I review what we discussed up to now, and then especially when I saw this press release, I thought it is a very interesting opportunity for us to discuss the press release and look at how the central bank is analyzing situations, and also based on that, for us to navigate through the entire syllabus and all the discussions we had up to now. That's why I did not prepare a special one. Okay, Gerald had a detailed one. So even though limiting imports has a positive impact on balance deficit on international trade, doesn't it raise prices of import good, hence driving the inflation in the short-term horizon? If it happens, should CBSL raise SRR to combat? Would it negatively impact on the financial system? This Gerald, now usually basically this central banking is a macroeconomic subject. We have to look at overall situation. You are right. You are right to say that when the imports are controlled, there will be less supply in the market. Prices will go up. You are correct. You are correct. The prices will go up. One good example is turmeric. And now the turmeric prices have gone, I think, 10-fold, even more than that. So that's a good example. But thing is this: we can't look at from a single item, and also sometimes for a shorter period there could be inflation. But if that environment, now in the press release also, Gerald, they mentioned import substitution. Now the nature of the policy of the government seems to be you curtail imports, create demand for domestic production. So the domestic production will be encouraged. Initially, the domestic production will help domestic consumption. But if it further expands, they are focusing on the external market. That is the theme. That is the theme of the economic policy that I saw. First, whatever the pressure coming from imports for the domestic production is eased by controlling. So they will have more opportunities to create. So then, if there was a gap because of import controls, that can be catered to by the domestic production. When the domestic production picks up, that also can develop into a stage where it can even compete with in the international market. So then the exports also will be higher in the future. Of course, for a shorter period, there will be some disruptions. Then driving inflation, short-term horizons, yes, it is likely. If it happens, should the CB... No, Gerald, now, simply because only one front is having pressure on the central bank decisions, they may not decide accordingly. They will look at, as I said, they will look at what is happening in the growth front, because they will look at what is the inflation gap, what is the output gap. That is one. And what is the international scenario? Whether the exchange rate is under pressure or whether exchange rate is also, stable. When they decide SRR or policy interest rate for that matter, they will look at the entire picture. If the entire picture is giving a signal, okay, now the monetary policy has to be tightened, in that case, SRR will be raised. Sometimes central bank can keep the SRR same, but just the policy interest rates. There are different possibilities. Can you explain further first two paragraphs in the press release? Okay. Who is this? Nothing, you know? Okay. Gerald, did I give you a fair answer for your question? Gerald? Okay. Okay, let's go to our Narasingha's request. Two paragraphs. Okay. What is the first paragraph? Okay, the very first paragraph in bold says the decision of the central bank, decision of the monetary board at the last monetary board meeting. They decided to maintain the rates at the same level of 4.5% and 5.5%. That is, the key policy rates were unchanged, they decided. And also it explains, somebody can ask somebody, because I know there was a rumor. There was a rumor by the close to the monetary board day, and central bank is, even in newspapers I saw central bank is likely to cut interest rate by 50 basis points. Like there was a signal. That is, they were expecting the rates to be 4 to 5. That is not 4.5. So if they were to cut by 50 basis points, 4.5 will become 4, 5.5 will become 5. There was speculation, but central bank had not done it. What is the reason? If the central bank thought that the full impact of the easing rates have been felt by the market, if the market rates are still higher, central bank could have gone for another cut. But this is Narasingha, this is now they are saying, see, the board recognized necessity to continue accommodative monetary policy stance, particularly as market lending rates are yet to reflect the full pass-through of the policy easing measures implemented thus far. Now, they have not lowered the rate. They are going to maintain the same rates. Why? They are expecting further reduction in market interest rates. Why? Because central bank has been easing policy thus far. That's what it says. However, because the aggregate demand is not picking up, they are going to have a targeted measures. Targeted measures is, rather than touching the policy interest rate, standing deposit rate and standing lending, standing deposit facility rate and standing lending facility rate, they are going to target the other one. That is, the board decided to adopt targeted measures. Targeted measures we saw. The interest rates on credit card and all those things were reduced now. So that is the target rate. That is what this says. The board anticipates further reduction in overall market trending rates, thereby encouraging borrowing for product. Now, this part is saying, in response to the lower interest rate by the central bank, market rates have gone down. But they say the board expect further reduction. If the interest rates reduce further, go down further, what will happen? There will be more aggregate demand. See, encouraging borrowing, thereby encouraging borrowing. We know, as we discussed in the earlier lecture, consumption is related to the interest rates. Investment is also related to interest rates. If the market interest rates go down in response to the cut of the central bank interest rates, then there will be more demand for goods and services. As a result, economic activities will pick up. Then what will happen then? Then that will support, reinforcing support. Then that expansion in economic activity, expansion in aggregate demand will support. Whom are they going to support? That is support for COVID-19 hit businesses. If the COVID pandemic hit some businesses, and if they were affected by, that will be eased by these developments in the market. as well as broader economy, given the confidence of the, okay, as well as broader economy. That is, there will be not only the COVID pandemic hit businesses, other economic activities also will pick up. That's why I say broader economy, not only the COVID hit ones, entire economy. Now, all these are saying accommodative monetary policy. Now, this last part is given the conditions of subdued inflation. Now, Narasingha, up to this point, everything was related to the economy side, that is output gap. But here they is saying another area should be the inflation gap. No, this is a given the conditions of subdued inflation. This is saying you don't have to worry about inflation because it is subdued. There is no any worrisome development coming from this area. Only problem you have is economic activity, no sufficient expansion in the aggregate demand. Therefore, you better continue with your easing monetary policy. Market interest rates have gone down, but not enough. They will continuously go down. Even though we are not going to touch the policy interest rates, we will have targeted measures. That is, specific interest rates. They are the ones related to credit cards. Then this one is comparing the global situation. See, rapid spread of COVID-19 pandemic and related containment of measures. Containment of measures means containment measures means now imposing curfew. People can't go anywhere, and also quarantine. People have to be. I mean, their movement were restricted to a given area, and social distancing. You cannot get closer to people, and because of that, barber salons and this spas, and also fit centers, markets, and even the supermarkets were closed. No, and the cinema halls, and there were so many things. Those are the containment measures. Because of the COVID, government has to take all these decisions. Because of that, what has happened? A in the Mune have resulted in significant downturn in global economy. Now, you know that more than 70% of the global tourist industry were affected. And most of the airplanes were grounded. All these are why. People can't move. And most of the countries closed their borders. And the planes can't come. Ships can't come. Then goods can't move. All those were affecting the global economy. Now, this is explaining what happened in the world and then what they did in response. Is it somewhat similar to ours or different? In response, almost all central banks of advanced economies as well as emerging and market economies. Okay, the first paragraph is explaining what we did. The second paragraph is explaining what others did. So they are saying, okay, they were affected. Now here see, the main purpose of central bank accommodative monetary policy in Sri Lanka is to support COVID hit businesses and later overall economy, right? Okay, we were affected, we did that. Now here they were affected by the same way. They also see in response, almost all central banks of advanced economies as well as emerging market and developing economies continue to implement monetary easing measures. They also did the same. Alongside fiscal stimulus by respective governments. Here in Sri Lanka also, the government had so many packages to encourage people and businesses. They also did. So here the second paragraph is comparing our situation with their situation, our policies with their policies, and justifying what we did was the right thing. Narasimha, did I answer your question? Hello? Has he left? Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Actually, what you have to do these days is, because I think the core of the syllabus we covered, but I'm going to go to other different areas and cover those areas. So as I said, we have to look at what are the financial implications of central bank operations. Using the central bank cash flow and balance sheet, we will discuss that in the next lecture. And also another area that we should know is, we know the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, but we have to know a little bit about other major central banks also. There will be another lecture. And there will be another lecture, because whatever the central bank does, whether it is for conducting monetary policy or conducting supervision for banks, the financial system stability, and controlling finance companies, and controlling exchange rate, managing EPF. There are legal provisions for those things. Central bank by itself can't do it just without any guidance. There are legal provisions. So we have the Monetary Law Act. Monetary Law Act governs. Central bank is governed by the Monetary Law Act. Whatever main actions central bank takes, they are specified in the Monetary Law Act. And also, when central bank take over the control of banks or finance companies and conduct supervisions, change the management, impose penalties, all those are in line with, according to the Banking Act and also Non-Bank Finance Business Act. There are two different acts. And when the central bank invests funds, because we know central bank has core functions and agency functions, managing EPF is coming under agency function. When the central bank collect funds, invest them, disperse them back to the members of the fund, according to the provisions of the EPF Act. And also we said under the Foreign Exchange Management Department, central bank can control movement of foreign exchange and also regulate the activities of certain people in this, and also appoint currency dealers and all those things. They are according to an act. And also macroprudential. We said there are macroprudential department. Again, there are provisions for that. And also especially Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU. The main responsibility of the Financial Intelligence Unit is to identify frauds and also identify culprits and regulate and study the financial flows going through the banking system and also going out of the banking system, study them, identify whether there are any elements of terrorist financing or money laundering. Because we know if there is terrorist financing and money laundering, all those are happening in the black market, hidden economy. Their behavior is not reflected in the reports. And by looking at the numbers, nobody can see what is going on. Then it is the responsibility of the FIU to study those things and reveal that to the authorities, and also cooperate with the law enforcement authorities to bring the culprit to the book so that those activities will be minimized. And also, as we said earlier, financial intelligence is not a Sri Lankan incidence only. It is a global problem. Therefore, there is a network of institutions, all central banks in the world, and there are some other organizations. They have a network. They always share information and also conduct. There are so many. I know there are, and also they sign agreements among countries. Okay, we support your country, you support us. So there are agreements. They enter into agreements. Once they have signed the agreement, they abide by the rules and regulations of those things. They have to comply with them. Then there's a coordinated global effort to minimize those black economic activities. Why? Because when the size of the unregulated part of the financial transactions are huge, then whatever the decisions you take for the normal sector, they're not going to be effective. Therefore, you should know exactly whether what you do has an impact on the economy. Because if the black economy is huge, policymakers can take many decisions, but that's not going to be effective. Therefore, financial intelligence unit is a very important department. And also, as with the EPF department is a very important one, because EPF department manages the biggest fund in the country. It is more than 2 trillion now, 2 trillion rupees now, the base, and it has to be managed. And all the private sector employees are benefiting from that. And even a small release of a small quantity from the fund can have a significant impact on the financial markets. So the central bank has the responsibility of managing it. EPF department, bank supervision department, non-bank supervision department, economic research department, statistics department, and the other one is currency department. Currency department is the department that provide the lubricant to the economy. Currency, legal tender, that's an important department. Those are the important areas. So far we have discussed. What else? But anyway, whatever is left. Now again, I would like to invite all of you to go to the central bank, the IBSL website, and look at the syllabus for the central banking. So I am following this lecture series based on that. And also, of course, I will not limit my discussion to only that. Especially, I want to give you an overview of the entire central banking, and also develop your thinking like a central banker, and also like this senior officer in the banking system who has to take decisions, and also whose business is affected by the central bank decisions, to get an idea about what is going to happen if central bank has taken some decision, what were the reasons for that, and what impact that will have your own business and the entire economy. That's the kind of an environment I wanted to create. I don't know whether I am successful or not, but whatever is left, I will discuss. And also what I will do is, before the exam, definitely, we will discuss at least 1 or 2 question papers. As I said the other time also, I have seen weaknesses in students, not only those who are following these courses, even in the universities and other places I have seen, people are weak in preparing for the exam. And especially at the exam hall, they are weak in reading the question paper very carefully and identify the material related to the answer, and then putting the answer in a particular order so that you can convince the examiner. Those things are weak areas I have observed. Therefore, I thought of guiding our participants. I don't want to call you students, our participants in these programs, how to think in line of with the question paper, how to figure out from where to get the information from the syllabus and to put them in a particular order. That's my objective. I will do that. I think most of the areas covered in the syllabus are done. And one more important thing though, I did not go to the details of everything that you should know. You should know to be a very successful student in central banking. You know why? Because under your IABF, you should have studied economics. So some economic concepts I did not touch, but I didn't go to the details. And there are some areas that you have to study under financial survey of financial systems. Those things I did not discuss, but whatever was important, I touched. What I'm saying is this: there are certain areas you are required to know. I did not go to the extent of explaining them in very detail. Now, for example, when you say this core inflation and headline inflation, I didn't go to the extent of constructing price indices, but we simply use the price indices like that. And also, when we talk about this creation of money by the banking system. I simply use only one single example. I didn't go to the details of that. That you should have, I think, according to syllabus I have gone through, you have studied them at the IABF level. Those things I did not touch. That's how I organize. Like this, you can feel free to suggest any changes in my approach. I can adjust to your requirements. Is that okay? At least one give me a response whether I can stop or not. Okay, who is this? Sachin. Others are also, I think, okay, right, okay. Another singer? All right. Thank you, thank you. That's enough. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Then we will meet next week. I will, next week, probably I will discuss about the legal implications of, now legal provisions for central bank operations. If time permits, I also will discuss about the financial implications of central bank operation, what the central bank does, how the central bank generate revenue, what expenditure, what main expenses does the central bank have to incur, and also if there is any surplus generated, what happens to the surplus. Those things we will discuss. Those are the important areas in the syllabus also. And there will be another lecture, as I said, about global central banks, important central banks in the world. Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice week ahead. Probably starting from tomorrow, you will have more traffic on your travel because all the schools and everything is going to come to normal tomorrow. Okay, stay safe. Good night. Thank you.